of different disciplines come together to make a champion.
We wanted to really look at the creatives behind the scene. It's all those little details that really add up to the whole.
The question is, like, how do we do that? How do we update a champ? So you take, designers, game designers, sound designers, you take artists, and you take narrative writers, and you lock them in a room, and wonderful stuff usually comes out.
Hi, everyone. My name is JANELLE Jimenez, and our first panel today is a look at how we create champions in League of Legends, specifically one champion, Gangplank. A lot of different disciplines come together to make a champion. Artists, designers, writers, VFX artists, project managers, brand managers, the list goes on. So we're just some of the people who worked on Gangplank's update back in August. So guys, could you introduce yourselves and kind of tell us what you do at Riot?
How's it going, guys? My name is George Christic. I'm a senior writer on the Champion Update team, and we're responsible for the backstory and the VO and kind of the thematic aspects of the champions that we update.
And my name is Moby Frankie, and I am the principal artist on League. And it's my responsibilities are basically making sure that the game is as cohesive and beautiful as possible. So I literally work with artists and just level up craft and whatnot. And specifically on the Bilgewater event, I was acting art director. So again, making sure that everything looked like it came from one source, in a sense, even though we have many different very talented people working together and just helping orchestrate that. So yeah, it's super easy. Just kidding.
Hi, I'm Mark Yetter. I'm the lead gameplay designer for the Champion Update team. And so I focus on the abilities of the characters. What are their powers? What do they do? And, if you're, this spans all the other projects as well. So if you're getting, one shot by Graves right now on live, that you can probably complain to me. And my summoner name is Riot Scruffy if you want to talk to me on the boards or any other place.
Cool. All right, my name's Curtis CHURN, and I'm a sound designer on the Champion team. So we create the sound effects for all the abilities that you design. And we work with the narrative team to record the VO and process it to make it sound thematically relevant, things like that.
And I'm JANELLE. I'm a brand manager at Riot Games. I go by Riot Stellari. My job is to take the champion and sort of present it to players. So take this art and this design and give it to players through promotional videos or comics or, like the Kindred teaser. So for Gangplank, that was his champion spotlight, his reveal page that evolved with each stage of his life, some of the things for the Bilgewater event. And so, we take these things, flesh it out, and then give it to you guys, and you guys you run with it, you make it your own, you come up with this great cosplay, fan fiction, fan art, and it really is the whole thing about, what they say about creators, where it's like, when you create something and release it to the world, it no longer belongs to you, it belongs to everyone, and that's really true for us, and that's something we really respect. So as players ourselves, we understand that there is a lot of emotional attachment to characters and emotional affinity for characters. So when we look to update a champion, that's something that we all keep in mind as players ourselves. So when we were setting off to update Gangplank, we had a few goals in mind. Our primary goal was to evolve him from this yo-ho-ho pirate trope and into this real character, one with hopes and dreams and ambitions and fears. And to understand how far we came, I need to introduce you to the original. Here's the original Gangplank. So this guy.
Can't even look at this guy.
So this guy, he is a pirate stereotype. He has the hat. He has this red coat that looks kind of like Captain Hook's coat, kind of looks like any pirate's coat. He has weird chest hair. I don't know if that's a pirate thing, but that is a thing that he has. He makes jokes about rum. He literally eats oranges to fight scurvy. He's a stereotype, but I found him pretty charming despite that. He had this like great ability called remove scurvy, like I mentioned, where he would take an orange out of nowhere and he would munch on it really loudly, like nom nom nom, and it was just like it was funny, and you guys loved it. You guys made videos about it. You made memes about it. You made videos and memes about oranges, but what you guys didn't actually do is you guys didn't actually really play him. So the reality was that. I played him. I played him on ARAM. I liked shooting people, but the reality was that he was largely forgotten, and he just really wasn't played that much, and like that's not really a good thing. And also, he was a stereotype, and while archetypes are good, stereotypes are something we want to avoid. So, you want to watch a good movie about like gangsters. Like you want to watch like Goodfellas or The Godfather, but not something about like a gangster stereotype. So when we were looking to evolve Gangplank's story and art, we were really looking to sort of make him less of a stereotype and more of Runeterra's pirate, I guess. And so George, so you have been helping to shape the League of Legends story for the past 4 years, and you were lead on Gangplank. And I remember there were so many debates, like debates about oranges, like should we kill him?
Yeah.
Like
Yep.
I remember some really intense debates in rooms about killing Gangplank. So can we talk a little bit more about that?
Absolutely. That was a big one about killing Gangplank. And then the hat, no hat controversy of 2015. Yeah, you were part of that.
Absolute.
Yeah. And so, some of you guys know that we actually did kill Gangplank, and we had a very intense meeting at the 11th hour because we've never done this. There were a lot of new things we did with this champion in this event. And it was a very intense meeting. And at the final moment, we decided okay, we're going to kill Gangplank. We're going to remove him from the game, something we've never done before, and tell the story about that. And I do remember, I thought that a lot of us in that meeting were going to get fired because,
I was a naysayer. I was
yeah.
not happy.
but we didn't, and we got to tell this story. And
How many people were hats, no hats here?
I was pro hat.
You're pro hat.
Pro hat.
anti-hat.
I was anti-hat.
Yeah. So, but the key takeaway is obviously we're all very passionate about what we do, about updating and making champs. And we feel that, it kind of goes into the game that we make and the characters we make. And so with Gangplank, we wanted to tell the story, some of you guys know, but we wanted to tell the story of this kind of pirate lord. He is like the king of an island nation of cutthroats and thieves that he becomes lax and lazy, and his bitter rival, Misfortune, kind of unveils her Kaiser Soze-like plan and takes him out, right? And so seemingly he dies. Obviously, we brought him back. And when we brought him back, he was a lot more primal, a lot more brutal. And he was focused on not only revenge, but reclaiming his throne. So he became a different person. So that's a big story. That's a big arc. There's a lot of moving pieces there. We were wondering, like, what should we do with this update? Should we do a regular update, which is gameplay sometimes, art sometimes? And we decided to be bold, to take kind of a page from Gangplank's book, to set our beards on fire and swing across the churning sea, to doom or glory, right?
I think it's his sword that goes on fire, not his beard, but
Everything. With oranges, yeah. So, the question is, like, how do we do that? How do we update a champ? I hear you ask, Moby. Well, I'll tell you guys. It's DNA, the building blocks of life. And we're not making dinosaurs, but we are making champs. And by DNA, although it's a little bit on the nose, what I mean by that is design, narrative, and art. And this is kind of our philosophy, both for creating new champs and champion update. So you take, designers, game designers, sound designers, you take artists, and you take narrative writers, and you lock them in a room, and wonderful stuff usually comes out, and a lot of good-natured arguments as well. So that's kind of our team statement, and then our mission statement is what we take out of those rooms are 3 pillars that the rest of the company can use. JANELLE as well as everyone else, whoever's going to be touching this champion, so they know who they are, what they are, etc. And what do I mean by pillars? So pillars, here's a couple of examples, like a few pillars for Batman. He hates guns. He doesn't kill. Wolverine, he's angry, sideburns. He has claws, sometimes metal, sometimes bone. Sorry, I'm nerding out. Jedi, they wear robes, pastel lightsabers, right? Pastel, thank you, art director. Usually they're good guys, but I don't know in this new movie what's gonna happen. Here's a wonderfully out of focus picture of our process. Again, the room's packed with designers and artists and writers. So we had a lot of story to tell here, and we weren't quite sure how to get it out to the players. And we decided, again, another page from Gangplank's book, let's be bold and let's do something we've never done before. We were going to write a novel. How about that? And we released it in 3 parts and 3 acts for our players that kind of took you through the course of the event, the Burning Tides event, beginning, middle, and end, kind of 3 chapters. And our players had a great time, interacting with it as well as the game mode. And we had obviously a great time making it. And I think there's like a key takeaway from that is joy. Like we are very passionate about what we do, and we share this joy with the other teams. And to kind of speak to the other teams and their processes, I'll hand it over to the beautiful young lad next to me here, Moby, so you can talk about what the artist brought to the table.
George, thank you so very much. All right, so we're going to be discussing the character design process of Gangplank today. And I'm not sure how many of you guys are out there that are aspiring game designers or artists, but it's a challenge, right? It's a lot of hard work to get to the final, to what you see. Sometimes, a year, sometimes 6 months, whatever, but it is quite a challenge. But at the end, it is actually a very enjoyable experience. Like, I get to do this for a living. Like, I get to do art for a living, for sure, for real. And it really does come down to like this problem-solving mentality. And I really don't like to use the word fail, because I believe that failing is like just not doing anything, right? So we go through, sometimes even hundreds of sketches to get to that final idea that we wanna run with. So as George was explaining to us about the DNA process, right? We use those same core principles on the art side. Design, art, and narrative all get together and pretty much problem solve and make sure that this character is all locked sync. That takes some time, obviously. Another part is the uniqueness. Now we have over 130, right?
128.
128, we're getting there. So that character has to really be unique in that role. And at the same time, like, we want him to stand out, for all the pirates, in the world, basically. He has to be a league pirate. And then that third most important one is iconic, right? So for context, our characters are seen at the size of a quarter in game. So what we wanted to do is we want to set out and just shatter the mold of what a pirate is. How are we going to create a Bilgewater pirate worthy of League of Legends? So as JANELLE was talking about, from humble beginnings. Now, originally we had about 2 weeks to create a character.
I think it was less than that. I'm not sure.
It was just like a couple of weeks. 2 days to do a splash. So these guys were just cranking out, very strenuous times. And then for the second update, we kind of went lateral. There was really no story attached to the character at this point, but it was just a visual upgrade. So again, we wanted to really challenge the convention on this next update. This is a scary slide for artists, right? Because it is, it's like, where are you gonna go, right? There's a million choices to go, right? Like, you go on the internet, look up pirate, and you're just gonna get, that typical European pirate trope over and over and over again, right? So it's very nerve-wracking. But the good thing is that we have game designers. And so the game designer actually is like one of the go-tos. So we already, for this redesign, we have that one pillar pretty much set in a way, right, as a foundation, which is awesome. So we have gameplay constraints. And then narrative swoops in, basically say, hey, no space pirates. That's easy enough, so no space pirates. And then secondly, king pirate, right? Like, it just makes it so much easier when you just add one word to that trope. And you're like, okay, so he's gonna be a pirate king. He's gonna rule over Bilgewater. I mean, in the sense, like, we knew somewhat what Bilgewater was, but we had no idea what this guy was gonna look like. It's very intimidating. He was a pirate boss. He was brutal. He was a dirty fighter. He was a wretched man, you know? But at the end of the story, he's gonna turn into this wounded lion. And you know what happens with a wounded lion? They become even more brutal, right? More dangerous. So all of these components coming together to help support art are extremely important and allow us to have these constraints. But at the end of the day, it does come down to that thematic cohesion that we're really looking for. All right, so how the heck do you get to this place, right? Especially when you have, you know, the referencing, right? It's all about the referencing. So for any of you aspiring artists out there, you're only as good as your reference. This is what I'm talking about. Thousands and thousands of images look like this on the internet, right? And so, you know, it's that classic European, 18th and 19th century pirate trope that's just everywhere. We want to retain a little bit of this in Gangplank, but we don't want him to just be, again, like Janelle was saying, pirate McPiratey guy. So Howard Pyle, father of basic, modern illustration from the turn of the last century. And then we have Norman Rockwell. And do you guys see something here?
Red coat.
Red coat.
It's the red coat.
Exactly. Pretty much the same pirate in a sense, right? So we don't want to go there. The only thing that Rockwell did was give him a peg leg. So we can't do that. We've got to dig deeper than that. So we found this guy. This is Iliad Repin. And he's a 19th century realist Russian painter. And you see a pirate scene like this, or not a pirate scene, but this is actually a depiction of the Cossacks writing a letter to the Sultan of the Ottoman Empire. And they're obviously look at that. They're planning and plotting, but they're actually having a jolly good time doing it, right? But look at all these characters. Each one of them is unique in some way or form, right? Like they've obviously gone out throughout Europe, perhaps, and have taken from different places, from Russia, perhaps down to Germany, whatever. The gentleman on the right hand of the screen is, he looks like Santa Claus in a sense, right? He's wearing a pink costume. The filigree is all over the place. Beautiful sword. Could he be Gangplank? Look at the mustache, it's all right there. So when we're looking at this image, we realize, okay, so with the king boss of Bilgewater, we can actually make him about 90% piratey, right? And then maybe 10%, barbaric in a sense, right? Okay, yeah, maybe go in that direction. And then conversely, with the wounded Gangplank, or the destroyed guy, maybe it's the other way around. Maybe he's going to be 90% of the barbaric and 10% pirate. So we're getting the yin and yang stuff figured out at this point. And then it's off to the races, right? Then we start our ideation process. And this is actually the fun part where we're making a lot of happy mistakes. Like this is where you want to, get everything out and nothing's wrong, right? You're not failing. You're actually problem solving, right? So in this case, Mark Gibbons does this fantastic illustration, right? Where he's just putting everything into it, right? Obviously, this character would not hold up inside of a game, right? Like our characters have to be seen at the size of a quarter. But what we can glean from this illustration is just fantastic. Like he has this filigree and he's just, he's festooned with lots of stuff all over him. But then, we have this other depiction. This is Chris Campbell's depiction of what Gangplank could possibly be, right? And it's these bigger, bolder silhouette shapes, and you know, he has this he's obviously a well-fed guy, big tattoo on the belly that doesn't hurt at all. Pretty cool-looking beard, never seen that before. And his form kind of says the function, right? Like he is this piratey guy, he has his sword, he has his gun. So that's one thing to pull from. We also explore, you know, a variety of different head studies and facial explorations as well. Because at the end of the day, like, this guy's actually a human being, right? He might be brutal, he might be a tyrant, but he cries sometimes, you know, he laughs, sure. He gets super angry, obviously. And then when we get to, we start really dialing it in pre-production. And this is where, you know, scope is really reduced. So then we actually get to the model sheet, and this is actually where everything really, really matters. And this is where it acts as a template for the modeler and a style guide generally. And if you look to the right, see that color wheel? You know, you get to see this ratio of color, and that actually acts as a branding. And that's kind of what the players are expecting from this character. And so at the end of the day, right, we aspire to create, you know, the best characters that we can, right? It's super important for us to bring high quality, loved characters to you guys, right? And that's something that gives us great satisfaction. And to talk more about that very important foundation, I'm gonna hand the mic off to Mark Yetter, who's gonna talk about game design.
Thanks, Moby.
You're welcome.
So these guys are doing so much great work with the, you know, the narrative and the art. But League of Legends is a game, right? And if the gameplay is not there, if the fun is not there, it kind of can go to waste sometimes. And we'd seen that with Gangplank. You know, he was kind of decaying over the years because his gameplay was not engaging players anymore. And so as a game designer, it's really, you know, my and other game designers like me responsibility to make sure that when you are experiencing the character, you're interacting with who they are, you really get to feel like them, you really get to have a fun and competitive and, you know, sort of engaging experience. So step one, like they both did, is we evaluate where was Gangplank at before. And yes, he looked atrocious and his, you know, story was very simple, you know, but his gameplay, some things worked and some things didn't, right? He had these iconic abilities. He could, you know, he'd shoot his enemies with his flintlock pistol and he'd attack them with his cutlass and he'd eat his oranges and its K, right? And so yeah, there were things to like. But when it all came together, it didn't end up creating a super diverse experience, right? You'd do the same things over and over. You'd find your target, you'd go shoot them with your gun and fight them. And there wasn't much variance. And well, when you're playing a game like League of Legends, where you're gonna be playing the same champion on the same map, like hundreds of times, 200, 300, 500 times, you know, you need variance to keep you engaged. And so one of our core values is looking for that type of choice, game to game, and options in a character's gameplay. On the other side of it, with the sort of whole picture of his pillars and the theme and the character, it also wasn't hitting on one of the really important ones for us. You know, Gangplank he's not the strongest character in League of Legends. He's not the most magical. He's not the fastest. But he's got this sort of resourcefulness. He's got this grit and kind of guile. And so, you know, we really wanted to make sure his gameplay was delivering on that feeling when you played him. You felt clever, you felt brutal, you felt, you know, like, you know, you baited your opponent into a bad situation and you really capitalized on it. So then we're setting out to make these gameplay changes. And normally if it's a new champion or if it's a character that really doesn't have much going for them, it'd be pretty simple. We say clean slate, you know, make all 5 abilities, make them great, make them all deep, make them satisfying, make them, you know, thematically, you know, hitting the notes that we needed. But we had an interesting constraint here. We said, well, there are a lot of abilities that we like on this character. Let's keep as much as we can of old Gangplank and fix the problems with, you know, a very targeted approach. And so this led to one very specific ability called the powder keg. The powder keg, in short, is, you know, Gangplank is this resourceful guy. He's got these barrels full of explosive gunpowder, and he can place them on the battlefield and then use his gun or sword to, you know, make them explode. And there's a lot of variety in the ways that he can use this ability. He can sort of save them up, hide one in a bush, or set them up in a long chain, and you can see the little, dotted line of gunpowder connecting them, and set up a big chain reaction. And so this was really working for us on a lot of levels. This hit really hard on like the amount of ways you could use these powder kegs was infinite, right? Every game you're looking for a new way to sort of trap your enemy, or a new way to surprise someone with how you were going to use your explosive barrels. And so it really worked out there because it also amplified what was a pretty simple kit, but because his other abilities interacted with the powder keg, it added layers of depth onto things like his pistol ability. Him shooting his pistol before was, well, I'm gonna shoot my enemy or I might shoot a minion. And now with the barrels in the mix, right, he's gonna shoot an enemy, he might shoot a minion, he might set up a barrel and shoot that instead. There's a lot of different ways that he was going to play out game to game. The other big thing here, the big thematic win was that, we kind of, the over-the-top nature of these giant explosions really fit Gangplank as a character. We kind of thought, this guy is all about disproportionate response. Someone steals 10 cents from his treasure cache and he's gonna go blow up their entire house. And it really felt like it was hitting on that. And we were I remember this meeting I had with George and a lot of other people involved, but distinctly, we were there and we had just prototyped this powder keg ability. And it really dawned on us that we were onto something thematically because what was it that?
Well, one of his key pillars was Dirty Fighter, and I forget who said it, but someone was like, yeah, he's the kind of guy who would roll a powder keg into an orphanage, to get his enemy. And we're like, that's it. But you guys should know that so many orphans die in our ideation meetings. Like, our champs are always killing orphans. So that's our go-to. It's like, would they kill orphans? Yes, no.
Oh, no. Well, it was, and so we felt really good about what we had done with this gameplay because we hit our goals in terms of creating this sort of deep and engaging gameplay, but we also hit a lot of the thematic and visual notes on the character. Additionally, the players, because we had a hardline sort of constraint, and we said, there are a lot of things that are sacred to a lot of Gangplank fans, and we said, we're not gonna change those things. We're gonna keep them and try and add rather than, table flip the whole thing. And that really, I think, paid off for us because, if you played Gangplank before, you didn't feel betrayed by this update. And we got a lot of that response, and so it felt really good. So we're all these kind of crazy idea people in a lot of ways, but to see how we really deliver and execute on making Gangplank feel real and sound real, this is Curtis Churn, and he's gonna talk about some of the audio design for Gangplank.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Mark. So the Bilgewater event required Gangplank to have two different personalities. He needed to sound like a dirty fighter and a scoundrel, and it needed to stay in both instances, but we needed to shift the tone of Gangplank over the story arc. So
this'll give him a reason to run. They'll have reason to run.
So you start to hear that tonal shift.
March into the ocean's embrace. Their bodies will choke the abyss.
So you get the idea. He's a little bit more jolly in the first ones, and then over the story arc he becomes sort of this more menacing version, but it still sounds like the same character. So when George and his team filled Bilgewater with lore, things like the Butcher's Bridge and the Slaughter Docks and Deadpool, his ship. Sort of, you start to develop this world that a king of Bilgewater would want to talk about. So because of this, I think Gangplank as a character was able to sort of understand the world that he was supposed to be in, and that allows us as developers to ride that wave, and it comes across to players, very almost like a cohesiveness that exists. So let's see if we have another.
I am as unsinkable as my ship. Mercy sank with my ship.
So the story of Gangplank's ship being blown up, that comes across in two different ways. One before his ship was blown up, and then second after his ship was blown up. And so one of the interesting challenges that we ran into with Gangplank was sort of how do we direct the voice? You know, how do we direct this and get that shift in personality? So what we did was we had a bunch of different strategies that we sort of took to the recording sessions, and it was having, you know, some of the strategies being having 2 different recording sessions, one for each personality, taking the relevant art to each recording session, having pre-plank, as we called him, on screen, and post-plank in the second session on screen. Then we had things like comparing the different reads. So if a line was exactly the same as the pre-plank line, but for post-plank, we would compare the 2 in the session. We would record and then compare the 2 and make sure that shift was being translated. And then it helps to actually have a voiceover director as well. So one of the other things is that there's a fairly thin line that champion updates walk when deciding what is iconic for that champion. Because, I mean, these champions have been around for a long time. So you never know what has become iconic, and you start to dissect that and figure out what you need to keep. Well, the choices that we made, you know, 6 years ago, maybe, for sonically for these champions aren't necessarily the same direction that we're moving in now. So we need to figure out what we need to keep, and if it requires, you know, potentially changing the voice actor, or understanding how we unshackle the new direction, and by cutting the old content and sort of focusing in how to reinforce the new direction while keeping some of the iconic elements of the past. So it happens in voiceover and in sound effects. And so here's an example of sort of the original voice and the new voice.
Nothing but a bilge rat. Never trust a bilge rat.
So, you know, that you get an idea of these iconic lines that have come across and everything, and you need to make sure that gets translated over to the new direction. So I guess with sound effects, we had a few discussions on what was iconic with Gangplank. And I mean, the oranges and the munching, like JANELLE mentioned, you know, all that needed to stay, but we needed to create at a higher fidelity. So one of the skills that had become iconic for Gangplank was this skill where cannonballs just rained from the sky. He would pick a location and they would fall. But the problem is that they just seemed to fall from the sky for no reason. They just happened. And we wanted to give a little bit more context with that skill. And so one of the choices that we decided to make was we wanted to create a off in the distance sort of team directional cannon barrage that you heard off in the distance of the cannons coming onto the map. And so that sold sort of that pillar of pirate boss and brought that skill a little bit more into who Gangplank was. And I think we have a video of that. So I'm not sure if you could hear it, but you could hear there was the sounds of the impacts, and you heard the sounds of the firing off in the distance. So you do run into interesting things, though, when you start to pick apart what has become iconic. And one of the interesting things about what happened with Gangplank sonically was that there was an instance where his laugh would happen over the targeted area of that skill. And I thought it was just a bug that made it into the game and shipped, and we just never took it out.
Does that happen?
It does. It does. Well, the thing is...
It's not a bug anymore.
Yeah.
It's a feature now.
It's a feature. So I originally took that laugh out, and it was funny because we were sitting in the meetings, and it was just like, this doesn't feel... There's something missing from this.
We tested it, and he's casting this ultimate ability, and he's not laughing, and it sounded so empty to everyone. We're like, what is happening? There's nothing. It feels so dead.
Yeah.
What's wrong?
So, well, that was one of the things, and I was like, oh man, it might be the laugh. So I put the laugh back in, and everybody was like, oh, now it feels like Gangplank's ult. It's perfect now. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. Yeah,
Lesson learned.
Lesson learned. And so I think that is a really good example of how voiceover and sound effects are working together to create sort of like an iconic package that works with Gangplank.
Awesome, thanks guys. So I think that's about it for us right now today. I hope we were able to give you just a little bit of a glimpse into what goes into designing a champion, updating a champion. So yeah, thank you guys so much, and we hope that you have a really great rest of the day. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you, guys.